Hey there, welcome back to my channel. I'm Scott Butwell, and I'm going to be sharing 5 tips today from Mary Karr's The Art of Memoir. And these 5 tips have definitely been helpful in my own writing, so I know they will definitely help you in your growth as a writer. I hope you see these 5 tips as like sitting down for a cup of coffee with Mary Karr and picking her brain about what she's learned about writing a memoir. Tip number 1, if you can't rewrite, give it up. You need to be able to rethink the easy interpretation. I'm a huge fan of revision. Like most writers, my first drafts tend to be pretty crappy. But when I revise a second, third, fourth time, what I notice is the writing gets a lot better. I start to fill in details and description that I left out. But what I like here is Mary Karr is saying something else happens when you're going to revise 5, 10, 15 times. You start to see the event at a deeper level and kind of rethink your easy interpretation of what happened. When you're first writing a scene, you might see an event or another person in a scene one way, but I think what Mary Karr is saying is when you revise a second and third and fourth time, a fifth time maybe, you start to see that event a little differently because you're going deeper. You might see another person in the scene differently. So she encourages to resist that easy temptation and to try to look at the scene and the people in the scene a lot more deeply. Tip number 2, a blazing psychological struggle holds a memoir together. Mary Karr says the best memoirs organize themselves around a psychic or psychological conflict. In other words, there's a reason why you're wanting to write a memoir. There's something that's motivating you, and it relates to this psychic struggle that you want to organize your story around. So the question you have to ask yourself if you're writing a memoir is, what is my psychological struggle? In other words, what's the thing I struggle with on a daily basis? And this is important because your psychological struggle, Mary Karr says, is like the storyline from scene to scene, chapter to chapter, from the beginning, middle, and end of the book, because it's the thing that you struggle with, and it's the thing that readers are going to be attracted to because they want to see how you work out this psychological or psychic struggle that you're dealing with in your life and in your memoir. The great writer trolls the world for totemic objects to place on a page. I love this quote by Mary Karr, and I've just recently really begun to understand it. A great writer trolls the world for totemic objects. I think what she's saying here is that a single detail or object in a scene can evoke the entire scene. That's why we troll the world, just to look for those little objects that can kind of make that scene come alive, make that place in a book come alive. I'm reading a book called The War for Gloria by Atticus Lish. And one thing I've noticed, especially towards the end of the scenes, is how the author will put in details about a person or a place. And I think the reason is he doesn't want the reader to be reminded that they're reading a book, to be noticing the edges of the pages. He wants to keep them engaged in the story, engrossed in the story. And I think that's what a single image does, whether it's at the beginning, middle, or end of a scene. It keeps you hooked into the story. Tip number 4, if you let yourself tell those smaller stories, the overarching capital S story will eventually rise into view. I call this advice from Mary Karr micro to macro. Basically, what I'm doing in my memoir is I'm converting blog posts into scenes. I'm looking for sequences that fit together, organizing around my psychological struggle. One of my biggest struggles in my memoir has been putting my scenes in the right order. It feels like it's been a jigsaw puzzle where I'm trying to put the scenes in an order based on subject or themes, and I've kind of moved them around. And it's only recently where I finally got the scenes to kind of flow together in a way that I feel good about. And I think what Mary Karr is saying in this quote is really true. Tip number 5, carnality sits at the root of the show not tell edict. By carnality, Mary Karr is saying writing that appeals to your five senses, writing that's able to kind of go back to an experience and be able to write about it as if it happened for the first time through your five senses. Mary Karr gives a cool metaphor to describe how she's able to create sensory impressions in her writing. She says she tries to go back in time and pick one moment in time and then start to pick at that moment like it's a knot. And she keeps picking and picking. And through doing this, she's able to remember as if it's happening for the first time the smells, the sounds, the tastes, and be able to recreate something that happened to her in the past as if it's in the present in her writing. There you have it. 5 great tips from Mary Karr. Hopefully, it was like having a cup of coffee and picking the brain from Mary Karr. And let me leave you guys with one last tip from Mary Karr that's probably the one that I think about the most when I think of Mary Karr, but I left it out. She says, when you're writing a first draft, you don't want to be caught up in the tyranny of perfection. I think that's a quote from Anne Lamott. So what she encourages herself to do is to run down the page naked. In other words, be totally free, be spontaneous, just let it rip. If you like this video, don't forget, like and subscribe for more encouragement on how to improve as a writer.